Across the Desk
with Clement Manyathela
on 702.
Across the Desk feature, our Thursday dialogue was yesterday. And today on our Across the Desk feature, I am hosting, I said to you earlier, they often call them PKs. These are pastors' children. The reason we're doing this is we recently hosted Hlomla Dandala on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he was sharing his experience of being a pastor's child and the kind of pressure that he faced. And there was a call that I received also about 2 months or so ago when we were doing one of our Healing Hour features. And there's a guy who called and said he ended up getting addicted to drugs and alcohol because he grew up in a home that wanted to force an identity on him. They wanted him to take over the church because his dad was a pastor. And he just couldn't relate. Yes, he believed in God, but he didn't want to be a pastor. He didn't believe he's called. So there are all sorts of pressures that come with being a pastor's child. These are people we hold in high regard. We put them on a pedestal as a society, but the experiences are also different. So I thought we could invite pastors' children who can come and share their experiences with us. So we've got Mpendulo Mhlanga, who's joining us in studio. Mpendulo, thank you so much for making time. How are you?
Really appreciate it. I'm well, in yourself, sir.
You happen to also be a pastor.
Yes.
Yeah. They must be happy at home, eh?
They're probably listening and like,
Yeah, we did it. Yeah, we also have Khotso Mariri. Khotso, thank you for also making time for us.
no, thank you.
You didn't become a pastor.
Oh, no.
And Jessica Dube as well in studio with us. Jessica, thank you for also coming through.
Absolute pleasure. It's wonderful to be here. And this is the first time my worlds are colliding.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an interesting conversation.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to start off with you. I want you to just share a brief experience as a daughter being raised in a household like that. What are the expectations looking like? Is there pressure? Were you allowed to just be you?
So let me just give everyone some background. So my name's Jessica Dube. My parents are Bishop T.I. Mtimkulu and Pastor Veronica Mtimkulu. They pastor a church in Sebokeng in the Vaal, Sebokeng and Van der Bijl Park. And my earliest memories are hopping from one building to the next, Sunday after Sunday, because our church, it was tricky in the beginning. It was a small church building and all the community halls in the community used to get so angry that this church is just everywhere. So just being around people, being in praise and worship rehearsals and
So you were part of praise and worship?
So, I mean, I was everywhere my parents were. So if they're at rehearsal, I'm at rehearsal. If they had a church leaders meeting, I'm there. There was no babysitter. So I was everywhere. I was friends with all the other pastors' kids and then all the other kids in children's ministry. And it was just a big, vibrant adventure that at times I struggled with it. At times it was beautiful. I'm an only child, so being around people was just absolutely fascinating to me. Where I used to struggle was the things I didn't get to choose. So Sunday morning, we are all going to church.
Whether you feel like it or not.
Whether you feel like it or not. And it's funny.
And you get there early, hey? 'Cause
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't
yeah.
just get there like us at 9, service
First
starts at
in,
9.
last out, And it's funny how I always said, when I grow up, I'm going to choose my own life. I'm not going to do anything like this. And I ended up getting into youth ministry and I'm exactly like my parents were. So
Really?
it's,
But you ended up in television.
Yes.
How did they rationalize that? Like, were they okay with it when you were like, this is what I want to do?
My parents have always given me or allowed me the freedom to determine my path. Even when I struggled with figuring out what am I going to be in this world. And also, I have to say this, from a young age, I was very clear on the fact that God had given me a gift with my voice. And I think because they had also identified that instead of coming with what they thought, which was that I was going to be a worship leader, which didn't happen. I can sing, I can make a joyful noise, but no. Have a musical ear, but no. They always saw that there's a gift on her voice, and they allowed me to determine that with God at my own pace, at my own time.
That's amazing. Mpendulo, how was that experience for you growing up?
So yes, Mpendulo Mhlanga, the pastor of General Assembly in Rhodoport. But I grew up in Nelspruit. My parents, I'm from Mpumalanga, Nelspruit. And the experience. Well, So I was told that from the hospital, before I went home, I was taken straight to get consecrated and baptized at a youth conference on the 16th of June before I went home. So from the hospital to church before going home.
You met church before home.
Before home. So I was told exactly that. But, it's never easy.
Yeah.
It's never easy because the pressure actually is not usually from the parents.
Yeah.
The pressure is usually from everyone else. Hey, pastor's kid, hey, PK.
Yeah.
And then in Siswati, people would say, Mfundisa kamdali mfundisi.
Yes.
You know that saying that pastor does not give birth to a pastor. And I went through my journey. The beautiful thing is that I fell into music. I have a picture of me. I think I was 3 years old, sleeping on an organ. My brother had just been born, and no one was giving me attention. My next favorite thing was sitting on that organ. So I started playing keyboards at the age of 6. I picked up a bass guitar at age 14. So church for me was one of the spaces where I could express myself as a musician. I got into different types of music later, released music. There's now jazz, there's now this. But it was beautiful for me all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people don't leave, it's now 8 p.m.
Yes.
Like these people are not leaving.
Yeah.
And when you calculate the number of beds and the bedroom, so my brother and I would immediately know that now we need to go grab the sponge and put the sleeping bag over the sponge.
Yeah.
We are not sleeping in our beds.
And that's the thing about pastors is your home becomes everybody's home.
Yes.
The door is open to people who are having problems with their partners, problems with their kids. They come there.
Yeah.
And sometimes they must sleep over. You must do the dishes.
Yeah.
They must eat.
I have many malumes and uncles and aunts that I don't know. How are we related?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was younger, I tried to, how are we related with this one? And then you realize, I know. She just came and never left.
Khotso, how about you?
Yeah, my experience was it was something different. I think my parents are, still in the ministry. They're still strong. And my dad is an evangelist. So, you go to church, building, once that's done, moves on to the next. I mean, I never had any choice, obviously just like she said, Sunday you go to church, and, religion was something that has never resonated with me.
From when you were young?
From the beginning, from when I was young. So it was very difficult. Ultimately, I had to subscribe to the rules of the home. This is what happens, I think to Mpendulo's point, sometimes you go home, like you expect to sleep on your own bed, but there's somebody that your parents are helping that needs to be there, sometimes for a week, sometimes for a month, and I think that outside of that, not even resonating with, religion in its entirety is now not having to disappoint my parents in terms of, appearances. How do I appear? Am I behaving well? Is this what's happening? I think, to this day, it still does not make sense to me.
Yeah.
I believe in a higher power, but, I think my mother had always hoped that, someday, I'll get back to God.
Yeah,
And
let's
all of
call that higher power God.
So, I just found it to be very stressful because, at the very same time, you don't want to disappoint your parents.
Yes.
But at the same time, you want to be true to who you are.
And self-determined,
Yeah.
right? Because what's the point of also following something not truly, but because it's forced on you? So did they ever say to you, did you ever tell them that I don't resonate? And how did they take it?
Yeah,
They put hands on you and start speaking in tongues.
I think it's just conversations that just went, past them to say, he has not seen it yet. He'll see it.
Okay.
Eventually he'll see it.
Yeah.
I've got a partner now who's, who's religious, which I don't have an issue with. It's her faith. And my mom was so excited when she first met her to say, now that he's with this person, he's going to go back to God. But I still feel, the same way. And as a father now myself, there was a tussle. I was telling them outside that when my son turned 1, he needed to, there was a christening, and, I was opposed to it. I'm like, let him grow up, he'll decide when.
Make his own choice.
He'll make his own choices. But, there was pressure from both sides of the family to say, this needs to happen, this is what we do. So I think, it's a very difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah.
Because I think what you said starting out, I think by the time I got to varsity, I was so happy to be outside of that environment and just not be responsible for, the perception of, how my parents looked like or, the church community, etc. I was away, I was in varsity.
Yeah.
I did not have to worry about that, and I could, be myself and not have that responsibility.
Yeah. How did you guys deal, Jessica, with just the expectations now from society? Because, as Mpendulo said, a lot of pressure actually comes from outside, where the church expects you to be someone in like your dad is a pastor, or these people are respected. You must somehow also take up something that's also going to put you here, even if you don't become a pastor. But they like it when they say, "Oh, the pastor's child, ke lawyer, ke what, whatever they think to them is like here." Did you experience that a lot from other people who just had an expectation of you that you must be like this?
I think I still see it to this day, that how can there be this big, powerful man of God, and then, some of it must have fallen to you, that anointing it must have. And where I used to struggle was not so much being in their presence or that shadow. It was that pressure that you're talking about, not necessarily in my relationship with God, but in what I was to become. So there'd be people who would say, I sense a calling of ministry on your life. And I used to shudder whenever I'd hear that, because I was going to be in TV, I was going to be in the broadcast industry. That's what I want. And I think it made me very fierce to determine my own path. And then I got to a stage where I realized that, you know what? If God didn't tell me that, if I haven't felt that in my spirit, then I can't accept that. So I'd always say to people, I'll pray about it. I'll pray about it. And it's funny how I fought that thing so hard. And one day I was sitting in Rhema, funny enough, and it was a pastor's kid on stage. It was Pastor Joshua Macaulay. And he said there, who will take this gospel to the world if not us? And it felt like my whole world was turning. And I knew in that moment, between me and God, this is God calling me into ministry. And it was, I sat there, I still had a mask on. It was still during the COVID time. And my mask was wet because I was crying. And I realized that my running from God had come to an end.
This is it now.
In terms of, I had a relationship with God, that's fine. But the call upon my life, I fought it. And I've realized now that it doesn't have to be either or. The gifts and the skills that God has given me, I can use that in the house of God. It all comes together, and He's got a greater plan, and I'm no longer running from Him anymore.
Mpendulo, did they tell you are called? Like, did your father ever say, I think uzoba pastor, man?
So the beautiful thing about me is that I spent my teens at home, and I was just thinking I'm just going to be this great musician, and so the pressures that I would have faced ended in my teens. So when I was 19, 20, I moved to Johannesburg. I now needed to be myself.
Yeah.
So the only time my dad said you're going to be a pastor is when I was telling him in 2016-ish, there's something weird happening in my life I don't understand. And for me, trust me, I had said I would never become a pastor. I had a relationship with God, born again, saved, and did everything as a teenager and as a young person, and God. But I understood that God's love had covered me. Yeah. From an early age, there's this one man, he passed away. He was an evangelist. He always called me Tycoon. Yeah. So from an early age, I had these weird names around me saying, yeah, you're going to be, and I just looked at them and I'm like, yeah, whatever. But I've always had these names. Nobody said to me, you're going to be a pastor. No. Nobody said to me, you're going to become, no. Everybody around would be like, yeah, you sound like a pastor. You look like a pastor. I'm like, hey, I'm easy da.
Yeah.
I'm zwadali da. Yabo. And over time, there was a time where it was just before my birthday in 2016, I think, yeah. And then I had this conversation with my dad, and my dad was like, yeah, nah, you were a victim of train up a child so that when he's older, he will not live this way, I don't think my parents were sitting there praying. I know my dad would tell me that he would pray for myself and my brother while my mom was pregnant. And not to become pastors, but to become whatever we wanted to be, but be covered by God. So I don't think my parents prayed for me to become a pastor, but that so happened.
What do you guys remember when you were young? Like, did you guys pray like a lot? Like, I mean,
Yes.
I didn't.
Yes.
My parents were not pastors, but
Yeah.
I do remember times when my mom used to force us to come kneel here.
Okay.
Come, let's pray. What's your recollection? Did you guys pray in the morning, during lunch, when you come back from school, before you sleep, at midnight?
I think to this day, my entire family, not just my immediate family,
Yeah.
like nothing happens without prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you eat, you pray.
Yeah.
You know, something good happens, we pray.
We pray.
You know, like I mean, ultimately, you know, you participate in those things because it means something to to the greater ecosystem of the family. You know, I think despite not being that way inclined, I see the value in it in terms of how it keeps the family together and how we look after community. You know, I might not necessarily minister in the traditional sense of ministering, but it has taught me a sense of community, with my friends, with my network, to make sure that we look after each other, make sure that, we're hitting the right path. So the prayer thing, my mother always says, don't think that all these things are happening because, of your own will and your might and all the rest. It's because, we are interceding on your behalf, and you are able to do the things that you're doing because we are interceding on your behalf.
Were you guys allowed? I'm gonna go to some calls in a moment and some WhatsApps as well. But were you guys allowed to listen to any music you wanted to listen to, or watch any movie you wanted?
What do you mean, man? So my dad was very, very strategic. So my dad hated anything that is a soapy. He called, sorry, Dad. He called the bold, and he called it the bold and the bloody fool. Days of our death. So my dad would be very strategic. At 8 o'clock, when Generations is about to start, we're going to have prayer. And then there's a songbook, one of my favorite songbooks. It's only my favorite now. When I listen to the lyrics and I go through the words, I'm like, yo, these people were deep. But I didn't like it. My dad, so that songbook, one song has 5 stanzas excluding the chorus. So he'd make us sing 4 of those songs. So one song has 6 stanzas, with the chorus. So by the time Generations is over, you've just finished singing. We have not prayed yet. So,
I think for
trust me.
So no Generations.
No, we would watch it. I remember when Yizo came out. And then we were like, yo, Asametso Bugeli. So I watched Yizo in my 20s as a series. I've never. So everyone is telling about it at school, and you're like, yo. What was happening when? I've never watched it.
Yo, guys, Jessica, you?
I think, I resonate with that. I remember there being a TV in my room, and then, every time I'd hear the Yizo theme song, dungu, 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 dungu. And I just remember an evangelist preaching in a crusade about, Yizo is this and it's that, so I had this distance from it. I watch it now in my older years, and I realize this was a transformative show that was reflecting society back to itself. On the thing about secular music, in our house, it was Ron Kenoli, Don Moon, it was Hillsong playing in the house, Joyous Celebration. Yes, these were but I enjoyed praise and worship so much. But Simonia Grooves, man, now and then I would tune there just to, and I struggled so much with just wanting society to accept me, and I wanted to know what's the secular music that people listen to. When I was a teenager, I grew this obsession with Tupac, and it used to irk my dad. He was the wallpaper on my
Even
computer,
the wallpaper.
and my dad was just like, hi man, this Tupac, you know. So I learned that, you know, art is a gift that God has given so many people. Where those things collide in terms of our society, that's another debate for another day. But in our house, your secular music, I rebelled a lot in that area. Now though, I'm on a completely different journey. I enjoy praise and worship music very much. It's informed so much of my understanding of music.
So you guys in Supatsela High School, ko yizo?
No. Man, I knew it in my 20s. No, never.
Fascinating. Let's go to some WhatsApps on 072 702 and 702.
Good morning, Clement. My name is Clement. I'm
Hello, Clement.
My father was a pastor in the Lutheran Church. Everyone thought I was going to follow in his steps, and I became a lawyer. He got pissed for a couple of years when I was studying at tax. I was not allowed to visit home. But yeah, you know, it's very difficult, but at least we got to reconcile before he passed away. Great show, by the way.
Morning, Clement. Ndate Moruti, Pretoria. I myself was a pastor's kid, and then they were like Ndate Moruti and Mamburuti, and then they also grew up to become bishop and Ndate Bishop and my bishop respectively, also to Archbishop and March, and then I went on to like follow their full steps, and then there's this consideration that I have to take their place, and then as a front runner to their position, so Ndate Moruti I will be.
Listen, as long as you feel that it is your calling, and that's what you're meant to. Oh, someone was asking about Megxit. Did you guys have Megxit?
Yes, we did. They didn't know about it. They were not tech savvy, so we had Megxit. They didn't know.
But also Megxit was safe at the time, I suppose. It's like you and your friends.
Yeah.
You know, it's...
But there's this one girl, I see her circulating on social media. We all had a crush on that one girl on social
media. On Megxit?
Yeah.
You used to talk about it?
It was a fancy face. Somebody like that. Yeah. So we had those because they didn't know about them.
Yeah, Megxit. It's 10:30.
Across the Desk
with Clement Manyathela
on 702.
24 minutes before 11 o'clock on our Across the Desk this morning. I'm hosting pastors' children. They've been sharing their experiences with us growing up, how they have dealt or rationalized some of the pressures, whether coming from home or coming from outside, the church, the society. And I'm asking you, if maybe you were a pastor's child, or maybe you grew up with pastors' children, what did you observe? What kind of pressures did they face? 011-883-0702 is the number to dial. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Pumlani, you're calling us from Pretoria. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you, Clement?
Good man. How are you?
I'm okay. You know, Clement, me growing up, I grew up under a church. I don't want to name the church. So normally, we don't have pastors. We have people who are called elders. So normally where I used to stay, I used to have like that one guy who normally it used to be like the old guys there who are elders. So what normally happens, Clement, is they act like pastors. They're very same as pastors. So the expectations is that, okay, as you grow up, you must get baptized, and then you start serving the congregation and whatever, you know. And you know what bothered me, Clement? What made me leave the church is that there was this thing that with them, when you do something, when we are baptized, they remove you, like even the family is supposed to kind of like neglect you in a sense that you are no longer part of the family.
Oh, so when you make a mistake or you commit a sin.
Yes. But up until you decide to change, and then the church, I think you go through interviews and whatever, and the church takes you back. You know what I'm trying to say. And another thing that bothered me, I think it's not only with this church, but with most churches. The thing of, they felt like they are the only true church. So meaning that the other churches are not true. In a sense that when you see other people, these ones are just worshiping the devil and whatever. So we need to take them to our church. So that I've always asked questions, how sure are we that we're the true church? You know what I'm trying to say? Like, what makes you believe we're the ones that are going to be saved and the other people are going to be like, go to hell or whatever the case can be? That they never answered that question. So for me, I felt, you know what, I don't want to get baptized. I don't want to go through all that. I'm just fine. I'm just going to believe in God, you know, in my own way and stuff like that. So for me, it causes a lot of conflict. You know, everywhere where you are, you always have to argue with people and stuff like that. Because when you believe that you are better than the other people and stuff like that.
Yeah, Pumlani, thank you so much for raising that. I actually hosted Bishop Mosasono yesterday on the show, and he was just also saying that, sometimes there are people who put pastors on a pedestal. Like we think, for instance, pastors are not human beings who also go through emotions, who may find themselves making mistakes. We think they're these angelic creatures that are, that are like God. No, they're human beings. They're just gifted. They have a calling. They have a different role, but they're human beings. And equally so, even sometimes with pastors' children, where, for the church to kick you out just because you've made a mistake or a sin, that's not what the church is supposed to do, even when you look at the Bible.
True.
That's weird. And Tabi, you are in Pretoria East. Good morning.
Good morning. Clement and Pastor's kids, fellow Pastor's kids. Hello.
Hey.
Listen, I have a very different reality. My reality is because I think there's a very big difference between Pastor's kids who grow up in ministries. And ministries would be that Ubabako is the be all and end all, or Umamako is the be all and end all of the church. And then everybody else, leadership cascades to the bottom, Ubabako is on top. But when you speak to pastors' kids who grew up in your typical Orthodox churches, this would be your Lutheran churches, your Presbyterians, your Methodists, your Seventh-day Adventists, you name it, all of these churches, our realities are different because there is a different strategy of management which happens there, and the expectation is not Ubuti now, it's more on Ubuti, how is your relationship with God? Is your relationship with God making you to form part of the arms of part of the different various parts of the body? Like, for instance, are you like in the strategy of your walk with God? Is it, are you the arm, or are you the leg, are you the eye, are you the, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So there's no expectation. There's not because you must be a praise leader. Sometimes you'll always be somebody who just can't sing. But there are other things that you are good at. You're good with kids. You're good with this or that or the other. So our realities are different. I would suggest, in fact, Clement, that one day call those who are from pastors' homes of the typical, what I would call Protestant churches, including Roman Catholic if possible, Protestant churches, and you will hear the huge difference between the two.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, Ntabi, and thank you for sharing that. Wait, which church were you part of, Ntabi?
Oh, I'm Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Adventist. All right. Thank you so much for sharing that experience with us. Nkateko, good morning.
Morning, Clement, and morning to your guests, the fellow PKs.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to share about my experience. Obviously, I resonate with, almost everybody's sentiments in terms of, leaving your bedroom or your bed. You're not sure if you're going to be sleeping on the same bed the next day. The big one for us was hospitality, especially after church.
Yeah.
So you just cook in this big pot, and you're not sure if you're gonna even get a piece from
no,
pot,
man.
because, yes, visitors came all the time, and you had to be prepared. Cleaning, changing linen, and my mother, who went to be with the Lord recently, was very particular about no one visitor can sleep on the same sheet. So that meant we are a laundromat, we are a hotel, a hospitality. I mean, we still have this running story with my sisters where a person knocked at around 2 a.m. and we still repeat that, and we obviously had to be uprooted from our bedroom. But I think for me, what was the biggest impact was the self-concept, because it communicated to me that I'm not as important as the other people, how they were regarded. But in retrospect, I also see where they were coming from. I see where hospitality plays a role in the Bible, where the Bible says, entertain visitors who know you might be entertaining an angel. So it was from a goodness of their hearts without them knowing what will be their long-term impact. And obviously, I had to work through that self-concept, the non-deserving kind of, whatever it impacted in me. But more than that, I think I'm grateful for a legacy of faith. Because more than anything, according to, I think it's Proverbs 13:22, a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children and his children's children. We said to our father recently, yes, thank you for leaving us money, but the biggest legacy is the legacy of faith. And that is what I want to pass on to my kids as well.
Amazing. Kateko in Pretoria, thank you so much for your call. I want to ask this, and I know it's quite a difficult question, but how do you, because, the way we parent is evolving now. There are some parents who say, like you said, Khotso, you wanted your child to make up his own mind when he's grown. What's your approach, Jessica, if you do want to have children or you have children? Do you want to allow them to make that decision for themselves, or you want to say, I will introduce them to what I know? And then if later on they see something differently, then that's them. But I want to introduce them to at least what I know and what I've always believed in.
I think when that time comes, I would want to, the first thing my kids must experience is the love of God. The love of God comes first. Our home comes first. And everything else must flow from that. One thing that I feel so grateful for that my parents did was, and I think you mentioned it, was covering me, but then knowing that there's an age of accountability that's going to come where you need to figure out this road for yourself. And, when I was a teenager, I remember being on the Johannesburg Junior Council, and it's these leaders from, different schools across Johannesburg. And there I encountered, because look, I went to a Catholic high school, public primary school, but in council, there were Jewish students, there were students of many other faiths, and there were others who were atheists also. There were those who were of the Baha'i faith and all these different faiths coming together. And it was the first time, that and varsity, where I really had to look at all these different faiths, and it's like my beliefs were tested. Philosophy tested my beliefs, all these different things. We used to have arguments on campus, but what about the missionaries? And what about, the Bible was distorted, and hey, the Bible was always the enemy on campus. But I think that, coming back to your question, it's important that God has given everybody free will, even pastors' kids. It's not that the Bible applies to the congregation and then not to us. Jesus has, behold, I stand at the door and knock. Jesus would not knock at a place and just barge his way in. He knocks because the choice is yours. And I want my kids to understand that, but I also want them to grow up in a home where there's the love of God. Yeah. That for me is important.
And for you, Mpendulo, as a pastor right now, what's the approach with your kids?
I still subscribe to train up a child. The verses, I think, is in Proverbs 22. I still subscribe to the train up a child so that he will not leave this way when he is old. Now, that I love reading the Bible for what it actually says. I love the English. It says train up. You understand? Train up. Now, whether the child goes there or there is certain values that will be instilled from an early age because they have been trained up. And I thank my parents. My parents were very strict. My dad was very strict, But I understand now that I was telling the guys that, if I was not here, I probably would have been worse off of everything that has happened to my life. And I'm the type of person who does not come and say, hey, no, I've gone through things, I've done things, but that training up for me is very important. It's very important. I actually was saying a few weeks ago that we need to introduce the love of God, like you're saying, the love of God. And the love of God must be seen through the parents. The parents must display the love of God. The other day I read a post. It says, religion says, oh my goodness, I've messed up. I'm running away from God. But salvation says, oh, I've messed up. I'm going straight to God. I need my Father because I've messed up. And that's the platform and that's the place where salvation comes. I always say there's a difference between religion and salvation. Religion is every other belief and every other church doctrine and church law. But salvation, Jesus says, come as you are so that you can be changed. And that's the thing. But for children, for me, it's important to instill certain beliefs. I'm going to take a lot of what my parents did. Yeah, they were strict in these other things. I feel like, but I was not allowed to play with a firearm or a gun. I was never bought a gun toy. And I understand what my dad was doing now. Because as much as I watched all those movies, I didn't know go practice how to shoot. And he was saying, I don't want violence to be the order of the day. You get what I'm trying to say? I'm going to take so much for my children. I'm going to take so much of that so that when they are older, I'm caught up by what my parents instilled in me at an early age, and that's what's happening for me. Really,
it stayed with you. Yeah. And also for you, does your partner understand that we must negotiate these things, because she may believe so, you may have a different approach. Do you meet each other halfway on how to raise your kids?
I think we meet each other halfway because despite us having different views, the values are still the same. You know, you need to instill values of kindness, you know, looking after community, just being a good person in general. And I think that is something that we can agree upon. You know, obviously certain things, you know, there has to be a rudder that steers the ship. And there's certain things that I cannot run away from. You know, I can't say make your own decisions about everything, but certain things to influence that, you know, you are an upstanding citizen of society. You know, and you care about others, and you're courteous and you're kind. You know, we agree with regards to those values. You know, with regards to other things, you know, that will be a decision taken between, you know, us as parents and what the child decides in terms of what they want to lead, how they want to lead their lives in terms of their spirituality and all the rest.
Yeah. What music did you listen to growing up, by the way?
Oh, I listened to all and sundry. I listened to a lot of heavy metal, you know, hip hop, jazz.
Did they know you're listening to that?
Oh no, I mean, played rugby in high school, so you know, every time on my Walkman I would have like my Limp Bizkit CD, and obviously sometimes if that comes out, it's like, what do you listen to? What's this type of music? I mean, I think there used to be a brand, it was a skater brand, it was called No Fear, you know, it had a skull and fire, you know, and, I had gone and, you know, like my dad said, hey, do you want to get a t-shirt? So I got this t-shirt and I got it home, so I put it on because I was so excited with regards to this brand. My mother saw it, was like, no, this is the devil. She started praying the same time. What is this? You know, this is the Antichrist and all of that. I'm like, it's just a brand, you know. And I think in that moment, my dad's like, you know, just relax, you know, let's just leave this thing. But I mean, in terms of music and everything, there was always, I think my dad was more the liberal, you know, instilling the values. My mom was the, you know, the staunch person, you know. My mom is a prayer warrior, like, you know, like sometimes, you know, even if I don't understand these things, you know, you can kind of feel that somebody's interceding on your behalf somewhere, you know, like somewhere.
Let's go to some WhatsApps.
Good morning, Clement and the 702 listeners. This is Master Strike here. I was born in a very Christian family. After being adopted by my grandparents, and my grandpa was a pastor. It was very difficult for me. I was forced to read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation at a very tender age. Knew the verses, most of the verses in the Bible. You know, it was so tough always at church. I had to do everything. I had to read out the Bible verses in church. Everything was just like hectic. However, it was nice until I turned 12. I was baptized, and then at 14 I decided no. I became a rebel. At 18 I went for military training. By 20 I started traveling the world, and now I'm a master in the martial arts, a personal trainer. Only believe in spirituality, nature, and an omnipotent being that is totally different from what I was brought up to know by grandparents. May my grandpa rest in peace.
Clement, it's Emmanuel from Malet. So I really can relate very well as a PK. So my dad is an archbishop even today, but he's now old. So you grow up into this church become a youth leader, you get married, you have kids. Everyone expects you to be a junior pastor because you understand the culture and the dynamics of everything that is happening inside the church. But as time goes on, know yourself. You decide to take the red pill or the blue pill. So that's who I am currently. The pressures increase. I still go to church, to attend, pray, and there's so much expectation. And if you don't really control it yourself and say, no, this is the path that I've chose, some of the things you don't have to say it out, but you just have to act on it. Thank you.
Hi, I'd like to remain anonymous. I'm a pastor's kid as well. And I think our experiences as pastor's kids are different because there are the Bazaloni churches and then there's the typical Orthodox churches which have been here for eons of years. Those ones, they have different structures and it makes it easier for people to be individuals than to immediately feel like they have the pressure of being called into ministry.
Thank you so much for your WhatsApps. There's a question that came through around the pressure to get married. Did you guys have that of, Jessica, you're a pastor's child, you have to, or at this age? And then there's this young lady, Mpendulo, that they say this is the one for you. Because Umawakena is an elder in the church. You can't just bring anyone in this house. Was there pressure for you?
There wasn't pressure for me. So you mean there are people who you are there and then they are telling you who you must marry?
When are you getting married? Yeah. And also you have to marry the right person. So you can't just grab a Clement on the street. It must be someone who also comes from a family that is from, this background, like the pastor, maybe dad is an elder, it can't be just this musician or something.
Sometimes I think where I struggle is that human beings add layers to life that are not in the Bible. I don't know where in the Bible it says that, somebody is determined for you in the church and now you have to, again, I come back to, why would God have given us a heart to feel? Why would God have given us a relationship with Him where we must work out our own salvation in fear and trembling, and fear meaning reverence for God? Allow God to lead you in those areas. I really, and if there's anyone who wants to disagree with me, that's okay. But this is the thing I think that pastors' kids really struggle with, is that inability to self-determine, or where everything about your life is just predetermined for you. And I think marriage is a big step, and there's no such thing as the perfect person. There are pastors who have fallen, who have made mistakes and have had to repent from them. I mean, if a pastor can make a mistake, even the partner of a pastor's kid can do the same thing. And I mean, this is the restorative grace that we learn about in the Bible, where Jesus came to free the captives and where Jesus came to give us, salvation. So I think everything that we do in the house of God must have a biblical perspective, because when we put our own rules and we say, no, you must marry this one and you must marry that, that is religion.
Yeah.
And for you?
So, thankfully, my parents never forced whom to marry, ever. In fact, my parents only guided in everything else, but I had a very strong self-determination from an early age. There's certain things that I just wouldn't do. There's certain things that I would do. So, funny enough, I'm a divorcee. Yeah? Soon to get married again, funny enough. And the mistakes that I made in my first marriage were not on my parents, were not on anybody else. It was me. I take full accountability for that. But I had a time where I sat and I had to go through, what is this thing and how did I contribute to messing this up? To the point where, the other day God was saying to me, I'm calling you into the marriage ministry. You're going to hold marriage seminars to tell people what the difference is and how it's supposed to be done. But I've never, my parents have, even now going to get married, my parents will never choose for me who to marry. But I do believe that it is important to marry. You don't marry the right person, you marry the right kind of person. Yeah, understand? Do not be equally yoked with unbelievers, I believe in a sense that And unbelievers is not necessarily someone who is now also a pastor's kid or anything like that. Unbelievers, somebody must confess that they know God, that they believe that they are saved, and Jesus Christ is their Lord and Savior, and to some degree walk that path. Everyone has made mistakes. I am the banner of mistakes in my life, you know. But I'm saying that it's important. Don't now go start problems. Don't go fetch problems for yourself. You get what I'm trying to say? Marry the right kind of person, the person who has similar beliefs. The Bible says, how can two walk together lest they agree? And you need not just agree because you have feelings for one another. Oh, my heart is bubbling. You need to agree on principles. How you're going to raise kids, how you're going to do finances. How do you believe certain principles? So don't go fetch the problem.
Yeah. And Khotso, for you, was there that pressure on marriage?
Not pressure per se, you know. I think, you know, maybe sometimes it was self-created pressure where every time you date, you want to date somebody that your mother would like because of, you know, because of the faith and all of that, you know. I always used to joke around with people that I date. I'm like, you know what, if you really want to impress my mom, read the Bible. I promise you. You know, you'll have a good time. You know what I mean? Just say one verse. But I'm like, you must understand that once you say that verse, you are locked in. You're going to have to participate in all and sundry. But I think later on, obviously, you know, I think to Mpendulo's point, you know, it's just to, you know, go for people that have, you know, shared values. You know, and that's how I determined, you know, the type of partner, you know, that I've chosen. Just it's the shared values piece, but there was never that pressure. But you know, sometimes even if it's not there, you kind of feel it. It's like implied. It's not there. It's not tangible.
Not saying it.
It's not saying
but you
it.
feel it.
You know.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for making time for us. Mpendulo Mhlanga, Khotso Mariri, and Jessica Dube. This was so much fun and informative. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.